I know who's sitting right here, and he knows sacrifice in a way I'll never know it. But I've been in rooms with him, and I've been in rooms with others like Dr. Rod Cooper, Gordon Conwell, and they've said that it's worth it. So it's worth the sacrifices. It's worth all the frustrations. It's worth all the hard conversations. It's worth all the humiliating moments that will come and will continue to come. It's worth all the accusations of tokenism. It's worth all the conversations after the conversations. It's worth all the carnage that's left by myopic people with xenophobic perspectives that they bring in to our congregations, even if they don't get revealed later. And on we could go. Listen, it's worth it. If a church of all tribes and tongues and languages was worth the death and the blood of God's own Son, it's certainly worth the burdens, the discouragements, the fears, the anxieties that we have brought into this room today. So if you have a Bible, turn to Galatians 6 with me. And I just want to look briefly at a little passage that's familiar to many of us that the Apostle Paul wrote at the end of this letter. And so if you haven't read the letter in a while, Galatians 6, Paul is sort of landing the plane. And actually what he's doing, at least in the verses we're going to read, is he's kind of closing out his commentary on something that he had actually talked about in chapter 5. Chapter 5, verses 13 through 15, he says this to the church. He says, "For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only don't use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love, as we were just encouraged, serve one another with your freedom. For the whole law is fulfilled in one word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and if you devour one another, watch out that you're not consumed by one another." And so then the rest of really that chapter, he talks about walking by the Spirit and the fruit of the Spirit, these things that we know well. It's just a commentary on that, and he goes into more detail. And so we get to chapter 6, and this is what he says in chapter 6, starting in verse 6. He says, "Let the one who is taught the word share all good things with the one who teaches." So apparently there was some division between the one teaching and the congregation and what sharing financially or otherwise looks like. But he's saying, hey, listen, part of what loving each other and not devouring each other looks like is letting the one who's teaching sharing with those who are being taught. And then he says, don't be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that he will also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit will reap from the Spirit eternal life. And let us not grow weary in doing good, for in due season we will reap if we don't give up. So that as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. And so there's so many things that we could dive into here. And you get the picture, and again, Pastor Leon's actually touched on it last night in Galatians 2, just the division, the confusion, despite all the things that the Spirit of God had been doing and was doing among that congregation, even the leadership there, including some of the apostles, it was still a train wreck. Because we're all on our way. We're all learning, assuming we are being led by the Spirit. We're all listening and growing. And so there's so much we could jump into here. But I just want to look at verse 9. Let us not grow weary of doing good. And I want you to hear that. Because some of you are weary. And what you need to be reminded of this morning is that a gospel-motivated, God-centered, Christ-exalting, Spirit-empowered pursuit of ethnic harmony and unity among God's people in His church, it's a good thing. It's good. And it's not good primarily because it's good sociology, although that's not unimportant. It's not good because it's so relevant, even if it is, to our culture right now. It's good primarily because God has deemed it good. It's good because diversity, it's not only a part of the very design of the atonement, Revelation 5, Revelation 7, but it's also a manifestation, a spilling out, an image of the very diversity that's in the Godhead Himself. That's why it's good.